The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary and his mother. They fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord. This is Epiphany. Epiphany, the manifestation. This is the manifestation, the showing, the making known of Christ, of Jesus to us. That's really what Christmas was. It was the making known of Christ to us. But on Christmas, when Jesus was born, he frankly was made known to the Jewish people. He was born into a Jewish family. The shepherds who came to that stable where the Christ child was born, they were Jewish. So in a way, Christmas is the epiphany of Jesus to the Jewish people. And using that sort of logic, epiphany is Christmas for Gentiles. It's for those of us who are not of Jewish heritage. Because on this day, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was made known to the rest of us. The wise men that visited Jesus represented us. They were not Jewish, they were Gentiles. Matthew starts his account off by saying, Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king. So what Matthew does is he gives us a time and a place. A time frame and a place. Jesus born in Bethlehem of Judea. This distinguishes this Bethlehem from other Bethlehems that may have been in existence at that time, and it matches the prophecies. It tells us in the days of Herod the king. This is King Herod. This is the one who was king over that whole area, that whole Palestinian area at that time, and he served at the pleasure of the Roman Senate. This king died in 4 BC. 4 BC. Jesus was not born on January 1st of the year 1. He was born 4, 5, 6, 7 years BC. The Bible does never say, it never says Jesus was born on January 1st of the year 1. So it's not an error in the Bible. It's not a mistake in the Bible. Hundreds of years later, when someone was developing a revised calendaring system, they used some historical documents that were off a few years. Now, Jesus was born in BC. So it says that after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, and they said, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. that spawns a couple of questions. Who were the wise men? Where did they come from? What was this star they saw? The wise men were religious figures of a different culture, of a different nation, of a different society. They were wise men. They were, I guess, akin to being priests of another nation. They were not Jewish, although they would have understood something about Judaism, because hundreds of years earlier, when the Jews were taken into captivity and shipped off east, some remained, and knowledge of Judaism would have permeated east. So these were wise men, learned men, educated men, powerful men, wealthy men, men of substantial means and political power. They were not kings. They were not kings. The hymn, "We Three Kings of Orient Are," is not accurate. They were not kings. They were referred to as king makers. Such was their power, that anyone who aspired to be king in their culture needed to make sure that he had the wise men behind him. These men came from far east of Jerusalem. No one knows how far east, 400, 600, 800, 1,000 miles, 1,200 miles. Some traditions even held them to have come from as far away as China. But in any event, they came many hundreds of miles each way. They were probably from the nation, the empire called Parthia. Parthia was constantly at war with the Roman Empire. As a matter of fact, they were fighting over the territory they were about to visit. So Parthia and Rome, the Roman Empire, were enemies. They were enemies. These men, among other things, they would have studied the heavens to see signs that would portend the future, predict the future. We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So they saw some sort of celestial phenomenon that drew their attention. For almost 2,000 years, people have tried to understand what was it they saw. What was it? Was it a star? Was it a conjunction of planets? Conjunction of planets is the near alignment, the nearness of, or at least the nearness as viewed from Earth, of multiple planets at one time. And there was a conjunction of planets about this time. And those various planets had different meanings and different associations in the Greek and the Roman cultures at that time. And the planets that were in conjunction represented the area of the Jewish people and the empires and the nations west. So just looking at those planets joined together would have ascertained, or someone would have been able to ascertain something happening west of them. There was also a supernova discovered by Chinese astronomers around 7 BC. Supernova is an explosion of a star, which would be a prominent figure. It also may have been not a celestial phenomenon, but a God-made phenomenon. It may have been an angel of light. The behavior and the pattern and the path and the plan of the light, the star, indicates perhaps it was some sort of a moving star, or it was an angel of light. But in any event, these men who studied the heavens saw this phenomenon in the sky. Certainly there was more than just the appearance of a star, a bright object. I personally believe that the Holy Spirit was also involved, speaking to these men's hearts and guiding them. So it begs the question, what would cause men to put their lives on hold for many months, outfit a very large expedition with supplies and equipment, manpower, leave their families and venture into enemy territory, a nation with whom they were at war, to go and worship a God not of their religion, and pay homage to a king not of their nation? What would cause men to do this? They would have taken a lot of soldiers with them. I suspect that there might have been some on that expedition who never returned to their families. I suspect there were some who were on that expedition that when they did return, some members of their families had died during the meantime. What causes a man to get on a camel and to ride 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles round trip, to do that? To worship God. What causes a man to do that? What drives a man? And to fund their own expedition, take their life in their hands. What drives a man to do that? Today we have hundreds of millions of people throughout the world who will not drive 5 minutes to go worship in a church. They will not walk 5 blocks to worship in a church. These men who were not Christians and they were not Jews risked everything to go worship the same God that we largely ignore. So they headed east, or they headed west from the east. And they went to Jerusalem, which was on trade routes that headed from east and northeast of where they were. And they got an audience with King Herod. And they say, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Now, Herod was not a Jew by birth, but he fancied himself as a type of Jew. He was kind of a Jewish mixture, but mostly Arabian. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? And Herod probably wondered, "Why don't you come to worship me? I am the King of the Jews. We saw his star. We have come to worship him." It said when Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Herod had some good points about him. He was a big supporter of public construction projects. He had the temple rebuilt, make it even more grand than it was in the past. But he was also a homicidal maniac. He had members of his own family killed, murdered, because he was afraid that they would compete with him for power. Some believe that at this time in Herod's life, he was deeply troubled emotionally and losing grips with reality. That may have been part of what was going on. When Herod the king heard that people had come seeking the newborn king, he was troubled. He might have figured, I was appointed king. I was made king. If there's a newborn king, he may have a solid hold and claim to the title. So Herod certainly saw this newborn king as a threat to his empire. So he did the smart thing. He assembled chief priests and scribes of the Jewish people. In other words, he asked the experts in the scriptures, and he said, "Where is this Christ to be born?" And they quoted the scriptures, the Old Testament. "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Again, this distinguished Bethlehem in the south from many other Bethlehems at that time, and this was the city of David. So where Jesus was born matched with what the scriptures said about the birthplace of Jesus. Bethlehem means house of bread. It's translated house of bread or place of bread. Jesus is the bread of life. It's appropriate that the bread of life was born in a town called House of Bread. So now Herod knows where this newborn king is. He needs to have more information so he can triangulate on his enemy and have him destroyed before he grows older and perhaps raises an army for himself. So he summoned the wise men secretly, called them back without the benefit of the Jewish leaders. And he asked them when the star had appeared in the sky. It makes sense because he was probably thinking that the appearance of the star coincided with the birth of this newborn king. So if he knew how long the star had been in the sky, he would know the approximate age. It would enable him to narrow the field to more specifically identify his enemy. So he found out, and he sends the wise men on to Bethlehem. He said, go search diligently for him. When you found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. What he wanted was the specific home so he can go and have him killed. So they listened to the king and they went on their way, which means this is a nighttime visit, and said, behold, the star they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. That does not behave like a normal star or planet in the heavens. Normally, it appears the stars and the planets rise in the east and set in the west. They move from east to west. Here, they are no longer going east to west. They're going almost due south. It's about 5 miles, almost due south from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. So now the star that had appeared to be moving west is now moving south. And not only does it move south, but after 5 miles, it appears to hover, to come to rest over the place where the child was. Now notice it says child, not baby. Child, not baby. Jesus is not a newborn baby here. He's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, maybe 24 months old. When they saw the star, when the wise men saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, not the stable, not the manger, not the cave, going into the house, they saw the child, not the baby, with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. One interesting thing about the sentence structure, saw the child with Mary, tells us that Matthew is again giving another reason why this child was no ordinary child. Normally in those days you would mention the mother first, then the child. The older people took precedence over the younger ones. But this is no ordinary child, fully man, fully God. So as a result, child is mentioned before Mary in the sentence. So they fall down, they worshiped him. They worship a toddler, maybe 6 months, 12, 18, 24 months old. They worship him. These were important men of their own culture, their own society, rich men, educated men, powerful men, esteemed men. And they rode for weeks, if not months, on this expedition. They come into a house that certainly did not even have wooden floors, it had dirt floors. And they fall down on their faces in the dirt to worship this young child. What makes a man do that? What makes a man? What draws a man to do that? Then they opened their treasures, their gifts. They offered him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We do not know exactly how many wise men made the trip. Legend is that there are 3 of them. That's probably because there were 3 gifts. All we know, it says wise men, plural, more than one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, however many. So they gave him various gifts, and the gifts were important from 2 perspectives. One, these gifts were worth a lot of money. They indeed were treasures. And it would be later on that night that Joseph, husband of Mary, would be warned in a dream to get out of Israel, go to Egypt, because Herod was going to try to kill him. They did not have much money, and these gifts afforded them the means by which to pay for their travel and pay for a place to live. Also, these gifts had great symbolic meaning. One of the gifts was gold. Gold is a perfect gift for a king. When they gave the gift of gold to Jesus, they were in fact giving this gift of gold to a king, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. They also offered him frankincense. Frankincense was a special incense that was used in the temple in the worship of God. The burning of the frankincense, the wafting of the smoke heavenward was symbolic of prayers. But frankincense was used in the worship, the religious worship, the ritual worship of a king, of a god. And now frankincense is offered to the true God, the true king. Myrrh was an interesting gift to give. It was used in the burial process to help stench the decay. It was placed in the burial clothes. Understand also is used sometimes to deaden pain, to anesthetize pain. It's a strange gift to give someone just starting out in their lives. But the gift of myrrh was a harbinger of the death that Jesus would experience maybe 33, 34 years later. The wise men were then warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, so they went home their own way by another route. This showed that God the Father was looking out to protect his Son, to keep him safe, so that the future that God the Father planned for God the Son would come to fruition. And Jesus would grow up, eventually begin his ministry, and have his ministry end with his crucifixion, death, resurrection, and ascension. When we do not feel like getting up and going to worship God at a church service, we don't feel like getting up and getting dressed and walking a few blocks or driving a few miles, usually in a comfortable, warm, or air-conditioned vehicle, we need to think about these men 2,000 years ago who risked everything they had, including their lives, left their families behind, and traveled hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of miles into enemy territory to worship this same king and this same God that we're often too lazy to worship. It's very telling about where we are in our own relationships with God. In the name of God, amen.